when you say that they're not fully human, do you mean that they're not like biologically human as in a human organism, or are you saying that they're not like valuable humans like you and me?
I'm saying they're not like a biological human right now. Like they're not, like they're gonna become a human, but they're just a fetus right now. Like,
okay. Would it be okay if I shared with you some embryology on the science of when human life begins?
Yeah.
Okay. Remind me your name. It's Jordan?
Yeah, Jordan.
Okay, great. So Jordan, in this first picture here, we have sperm and egg. These are functional parts of a male and female's body. They're not human organisms in themselves, or parts of a human organism, right? Mm-hmm. So that would not be a human being. But when they come together, they actually cease to exist as individual gametes, and they create a genetically distinct human organism that is different from both the mother and the father. And if you were to open up a embryology textbook, it would talk about how the unborn are organisms that are on their own path of development, growing from within themselves, or it's not like it's the outside forces that are like adding arms at week 2 or on that way. And in order for them to grow, they just need adequate nutrition, the proper environment, and time, which is similar to a newborn, a toddler, or you and me. We would need those three things. Now, Jordan, this is actually when you got your Jordanness, because this is when you got your eye color, your hair color, your skin color. So many attributes about you were determined at this point. And so embryologists, when they're talking about whether the unborn are human, they generally don't disagree about whether they're biologically human organisms. What they might disagree on is whether that human organism has value or is a person, whether they have rights. And that is no longer a biological question, that's a philosophical one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important question that we need to answer because we've answered it really wrong in the past. For example, in the Holocaust, someone said you have to be human and not a Jew in order to be a person. Slavery, you have to be human and not black to be a person. With sexism, you have to be human and a man to be a person. Right? And what is the common denominator that you notice about all those things?
It's not fair. Like, those people are human too. Mm-hmm. We all share the same blood. Well, we don't share the same blood, but we all have all our blood comes out red. So we're all human.
Yeah, it's not fair because they're ignoring the fundamental thing we have in common, which is our humanity, mm-hmm. and dismissing it by adding on criteria like skin color or ethnic group and using that as the relevant characteristic for what makes us valuable or not. And so when I'm thinking about abortion, something that helps me consider that question, what makes a person a person? Well, I look at clear cases like you and me. I think that you and I are equally valuable. It'd be equally wrong for anyone to harm either of us. And I think I would say that about anyone on this campus as well. But it's actually weird that we think that because we're so different. For example, you have darker skin than me. Some people are taller, and most people are shorter than me, actually. There's people of different socioeconomic statuses, hair colors, like the list literally could go on. And to be clear, I absolutely think we should be treated equally. But there has to be something the same about us to explain why that is. And so my question for you is, what is the same about you and me, despite our differences, that demands our equal treatment?
This is probably gonna sound stupid, but because I just said this, but we all bleed the same blood. Like our blood comes out red. I feel like we both walk, we both talk, even if you don't walk or talk, like you're still a human. Like whoever's a human, you deserve rights. Like, I don't know how to explain it better.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think that makes sense. Actually, I think it is the fact that we are human. And that explanation actually does make sense of why things like racism and sexism, ableism, all other forms of discrimination are wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Focusing on a difference rather than our fundamental similarity.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm pro-life is because if it's our humanity that demands our equality, and if the unborn, which we can know through science that they are human from fertilization, if that is true, then what that tells me is we ought to extend those rights to the unborn, because otherwise we'd be saying that there is a certain group of humans who don't have human rights. So what are your thoughts on that?
I just believe, true, we are limiting them, but they don't have the mental capacity to think about that right now because they're not alive. So I just feel like, I don't know, man. I just feel like we should just let people who want to have abortions, and people who don't want to have abortions, let them have the baby. I don't know. Sure. Sorry, I sound stupid right now.
No, that's okay. I get where you're coming from. I guess the reason where I would push back and why is because if we were to have a woman who, let's just say that she's in poverty, she's a single mom, she's in school, it's three really difficult things on top of each other, right? And she has a toddler. And she feels like she can't take care of this toddler. What solutions would we give her or allow her to use in order to help her out of her situation?
I feel like adoption's always a great choice. I'm adopted myself twice.
Nice.
So
twice.
Yeah, so I believe in adoption real bad. Adoption's always a great thing. Like, I got into a great family and I'm here now and I'm at college and living my life, so adoption would be a great choice.
I'm really glad to hear that you've had a good experience because yeah, that's so beautiful. Now, this is going to be blatantly obvious, but I think the option that we can't give this woman is to allow her to kill her toddler, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think the reason for that is because her toddler is a human being. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's significant is we're not saying I don't care about your poverty, I don't care about your single motherhood or the fact that you're in school. We're saying I care so much about you and I want you to have choices in a better life, but I want you to have choices that benefit both of you and aren't at the expense of your child, right? And so what this tells me is that abortion, yes, there are so many difficult circumstances that women find themselves in. And those are very important. I never want to pretend that they're not. But it seems like whether abortion is right or wrong, whether it should be legal or not, depends on whether the unborn are human or not. Because if we wouldn't allow that as an option for a woman in the same circumstance with a toddler, then the question is, why would we allow that to happen to a human who's smaller and younger? Now, that's under the assumption that the unborn are human, right? But can you see where I'm coming from with if they are human, that would have to follow for purposes of justice and respecting their life? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, I totally get, though, that when you're looking at 4-week embryo or even an implantation at 6 days here, like with this picture, almost looks like a tangerine that I'm looking at. If I had no idea that I was looking at implantation, I'd be like, I don't know what that is. You know? And so I recognize that it's really hard to feel connected to the unborn in their early stages, especially because they look so different from us. And something that helps me process through that, though, is whether that changes anything, is asking myself, well, does what we look like or what we can do change how valuable we are? And I think the answer to that question is no. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Because we're valuable not based on our utility, but on what we are, right?
Yeah.
And so I will admit that it's so much harder for me to feel connected to the unborn in their early stages, but I recognize that since they are still, they still share that common human nature, justice demands that we protect them.
I mean, I wouldn't say I necessarily disagree. It's just, you have your viewpoints, I have my viewpoints. At the end of the day, it's just going to go back and forth. I feel like we have rights to have our own viewpoints, so let people have their own viewpoints.
Sure. So, we really could go back and forth for a long time. I guess where I might want to challenge you is that if what I am saying is true, that would mean that over 800,000 humans every single year in the United States alone would be unjustly killed. That I don't think that kind of gravity is something that we can respond by saying to each their own, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's under the assumption that what I'm saying about them is true. So I would really want to encourage you to look up the embryology of when human life begins and the biology of that. Now, on the other hand, if what I'm saying is wrong, if the unborn aren't biologically human, if they're not human organisms, then yeah, pro-life people are unjustly trying to take away people's choices and rights. So I don't think either of us can have a to each their own mentality about this. I think we have to be very cautious and do our research on this, because whichever way you slice it, someone is violating a human right. And when it comes to human rights, that's not something that's a personal opinion. That's something that needs to be protected by law.